Well, it will be many hours before we start getting a clear picture of what the outcome of the U.S. election might be. So let's go live now to America, where we find our correspondent Simon Marks, and he's live to us from Washington, D.C. Simon, thank you so much for making time. So voting has started in some parts of the U.S. How are things going so far?
Well, very busily, as you can imagine, Clement. I mean, we learnt within the last couple of hours that in early voting, all those people that took part in the election before this particular day dawned in the United States, nearly 100 million people cast their ballots. That would suggest that today, polling stations all over the country are going to see somewhere between 40 and 55 million people participating in this election. It's absolutely evident that we're going to see record turnout, and that's a reflection of the fact that Americans understand the importance of this election historically. You know, every presidential candidate always tells you this is the most important election of your lifetime. You must show up, you must participate. But this time round, the sense in the United States is it really is the most important election, because there is this sense of tension and foreboding, uncertainty about how things are going to end up here, and also, of course, a sense that after 4 years of the roller coaster ride that the country has been on with President Donald Trump, the country isn't sure if it wants to stay on the roller coaster or if it fancies a little bit of time on terra firma. We will find out in a few hours' time, maybe.
Yeah, certainly, a roller coaster. I want us to reflect on the closing campaign remarks by both the presidential candidates, Simon. They were in Pennsylvania yesterday. I see Trump warned of cheating while Biden was busy promising the beginning of a new day.
Yeah, I mean, they were in characteristic mode. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, Donald Trump's election campaign has been a campaign in which he has largely chased straw men, created them and chased them. So he was arguing again yesterday that Joe Biden leads a corrupt, organized crime family, despite the fact there is absolutely no evidence to support that claim. He argues that the Democrats are going to engage in the fraudulent use of postal voting in a bid to steal the election. There is absolutely no evidence to support the president's claim that millions of postal votes are fraudulently cast in American presidential elections. And he also continued, even yesterday, to raise questions about Joe Biden's cognitive abilities and whether he is capable of serving as president. Indeed, he suggested that Marxist radicals are simply waiting for Joe Biden to win the keys to the Oval Office so they can then sweep him aside and destroy American life as we know it. That's all a very curious presentation to make on the campaign trail at a time when the president's opponent, Joe Biden, has got holes in his policy proposals that wouldn't be amiss in a lump of Swiss cheese. Donald Trump could have spent the last several weeks going after Joe Biden on what the Democrats say is their national plan to combat COVID-19. It's very short on specifics, that plan, and some of the things that Joe Biden says he wants to do as president, he may not even have the legal authority to do as president. But instead of going after Biden on policy, Trump's been going after him on all of these issues that appeal to Donald Trump's base, but not necessarily to those all-important undecided floating voters who will end up deciding the outcome of this election.
Are there some areas that have already started announcing results? I was reading about a small township where Joe Biden managed to take all the 5 votes.
Yeah, absolutely. The famous hamlet of Dixville Notch in New Hampshire, where they hold their vote at midnight, just as Election Day dawns. 5 votes were cast there, all of them for Joe Biden. Do not set any store in what the residents of Dixville Notch decided to do last night, because in 2016, 4 of them voted, and they all voted for Hillary Clinton. So I don't think we can read very much into that. Results will start coming in more broadly once polls close, and they close at around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning South Africa time here on the East Coast. That's when they start closing, and then of course as the sun goes down across the United States it rolls over to the west, and that's when we start getting results. I mean, the big question, Clement, is when everybody wakes up tomorrow morning in South Africa, are we going to know who has won this presidential election? And I suspect we may not at that point know. It might come in the middle of the day tomorrow, South Africa time, but if this thing is closely fought, then it could be days before we know the outcome.
And that's an interesting question, Simon, because Donald Trump indicated that the announcement of the results must be made on the day of the election, even if there are still some votes that still need to be counted. How is that going to work?
Well, it's another straw man that the president has created, because there's no requirement to announce the outcome of the election on the night of the election. Indeed, on numerous occasions in American history, it hasn't happened. If the election is close, let's say it hinges on Florida and Pennsylvania, and they're both too close to call, well, at that point, the postal votes that have been submitted in those states will become absolutely crucial. And there could be people putting ballots into envelopes today and putting them into post boxes in Pennsylvania that don't reach election officials for a week. So at that point, those postal votes become absolutely essential. And Donald Trump, of course, keeps intimating that in some world, the value of a postal vote is lesser than the value of a vote that's cast by someone who has queued up. Unfortunately for Donald Trump, that's not the way the law or the US Supreme Court even last week saw things. They argue that all the votes need to be counted in order to attain the full result of the election, and as a result, you know, the president may end up being a very frustrated TV viewer tonight. You know, he's a TV maven. He wants the season finale of the election tonight to be on his TV at the White House, but you'd think that he knows that sometimes cliffhangers can be exciting as well.
Yeah, I want to get a mood on the ground, Simon, because it does really feel like a different kind of election. You know, the fears that some people have of possible violence posed today. Does it feel like an American election with a celebration of democracy?
No, not in the slightest. I mean, as you know, Clement, I've been here a very long time. I got here in 1992, so I've almost lost count of how many of these things I've now covered. But we've never seen the kind of things that we're witnessing on the streets of Washington and other major cities associated with elections in the past. Buildings all being boarded up to protect their glass facades, shops and offices closing, everybody largely either going to the polling station or staying home in many cases here today, amid concerns that there could be violence on the streets. There are certainly some groups, including one called Shut Down DC, that have applied for protest permits here for later in the week. They're clearly waiting to see which way this election goes. And of course, the actions by some of President Trump's supporters over the last few days, particularly in Texas, where they tried to run a Biden campaign bus off the road, has also raised the sense of tension here. Tensions that I think have undoubtedly been fueled by the 4 years that we've all just lived through, and that leaves many Americans wondering, are we going to stay on that roller coaster that I mentioned, or are we at least for some period of time going to find ourselves in more predictable stable political territory? We just don't know yet.
Yeah, and we'll have to wait and see as more Americans. Simon Marks, thank you so much for your time there, live to us from Washington, D.C., confirming that there's possibly around 40 to 55 million Americans that will be coming out to vote today. Right.